If you've seen the Gamer's Nexus review on your Zotac 1080 Ti Amp Extreme Edition, you may be wondering, so how hard is it exactly to cool down the VRM by linking those two heatsinks? How do I do it? Well, you've come to the right place, because I'm going to show you how to do it. Chances are, if you don't run a tech channel with more than 100,000 subscribers, you probably don't have a bunch of spare thermal pads laying around, which is why I have linked the one I used down in the description of this video. In this card, the VRM for the heatsink, which is right under here, is now linked to the major big heatsink thanks to layering up some thermal pads. I did 3 layers thick, although you could probably get away with 2. I went with 3 layers in particular, so that when I squish this down a little bit, the thermal pad will kind of bend and curve around some of the fins, making better contact with the 2 heatsinks. While I was at it, I took a little bit of extra thermal pad that I had left, and I tucked it under some of the VRM area up against the backplate in this area here, because nothing else is really making contact with the backplate at all. So hopefully I'll be able to transfer some heat into the backplate, and hopefully that will help with cooling as well. So without any further ado, let's crack open this card and get modding. Step 1 is to flip it upside down so that the fans are up against the work surface. Undo the 4 screws around the GPU itself, as well as all the other screws around the edges of the backplate. You may have to wiggle the heatsink a bit to get it off, but don't wiggle it too much. Unplug the 2 wires for the fans and RGB header. And if you're going to do what I did, where you have some thermal pad between the PCB and the backplate, which is optional, you would go ahead and remove the backplate from the PCB. Now you're going to take your thermal pad and cut it into strips. You can use scissors or the edge of a flathead screwdriver. I did 1 layer across the VRM heatsink like that, and then another layer which I then rolled or folded in half. And that could be all you need to do with your thermal pad, unless you're doing what I'm doing and adding some thermal pads to the bottom to share the heat to the backplate as well. Next, you want to take some isopropyl alcohol and some cotton balls or paper towels and wipe away all the old thermal compound that was on both the heatsink as well as the GPU itself. It's not recommended to use a screwdriver to get stuff out because it's metal and can scratch things, but as long as you're gentle, it should be fine. Before I apply thermal compound, I'm just going ahead and screwing the PCB back into the backplate. A little bit of thermal compound. I applied too much, so I dabbed some off. Next up, reconnecting all the wires, and then putting the heatsink on, making sure everything's lined up and that it's spread alright, and then screwing everything back together. And that's all there is to it. I do not have a reliable way to measure the temperature of the VRM on this card. I am not Gamer's Nexus, I don't have a bunch of spare thermisistors or thermocouples laying around. Thanks so much for watching this video, hopefully you found it super useful. Let me know down below if you have scientific equipment, have you been able to measure much of a difference? Please, I'm anxious to hear. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and check out some of our previous videos. Thanks so much. See you next time.